So I wanted to make a quick video sort of dismissing this myth I see a lot of people falling into, which is that there's some truth to it, like all myths, but it is a myth of sort of the historical foundations of neo-pagans. And even the term neo-pagan, I think, is a little bit disingenuous, but I guess let's define terms. What's a neo-pagan? A neo-pagan, or just a pagan in general, is a person who, in the modern day, chooses to uh, attempt to embrace the traditions of pre-Christian, normally European, but sometimes uh, Roman, Greek, or let's see. I guess those fall under European, but by Western European, I really meant Slavic, Celtic, Nordic, and then you have Egyptian, uh, Greek, Roman, really any non-Christian polytheistic thing um, would be considered like being, trying to be imitated or sort of. I hesitate to use the word worship because it's sort of corrupted by the Christian understanding of worship because their worship is specifically designed for a singular thing. Um, in my experience, most pagans don't necessarily worship their entities. It's more of a give and take relationship. And many of these things are not things you would necessarily want to worship, but they're still things that exist that you would want to understand. So, um, there's this myth that among Christians, especially, it's propagated by Christians, that neo pagans, I think it was this belief was well put as their foundation for belief is Jung and mushrooms. And while that may be true for a lot of people, um, and emphasis on the mushrooms and not much on the Jung, because Jung is actually fairly difficult to read. There are a lot of surviving texts that have been dated to pre-Christian times. Now, this gets muddled a bit because of the power of the church in the Middle Ages and the sort of total domination that this worldview had. Um, like Christianity was very influential in the creation of literacy as such. So a lot of these sort of more pagan traditions, these non-Christian traditions, their texts were either destroyed or edited to fit a slightly more Christian narrative, but they survive in a lot of these stories of like fairy tales and stories of sort of angels and demons, a lot of angels and demons. So, in a way, you could look at it as these sort of Christians erasing pagan history. You could also look at it as pagan and Christian history fused together, and you can actually extract a large part of the pagan understanding from the Christian understanding. But at the end of the day, these worldviews are both worldviews that exist in the world. They're different ways of describing the world, but they point to the same world itself. But this idea that there's no non-Christian texts, I mean, it's about as ridiculous as some of the arguments the new atheists make. You can do like a very quick cursory glance over uh, a large amount of alchemical manuscripts. You can, understand things like the Egyptian Book of the Dead and Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, and I mean, there's a lot of pre-Christian texts, and and also, like I said, you can also extract out the meaning of a lot of pre-Christian stuff from analyzing uh, like stories and sort of Anglican, or I mean Christianizations of these traditions. Like, I mean, even the idea of hell is some mixture of Hades and Helheim from the Nordic tradition. Um, and the fact that this stuff was written by Christians, a lot of it is, to me, as irrelevant as anything. I mean, you can trace that thread back in most cases. Now, there's another problem with this argument, the sort of Jung and uh, and psychedelics argument. One of them is that the sources are actually there. The sources for believing these things and understanding these things historically are actually there. The other is that, so like, take somebody in the Bible Belt, somebody who, they don't really have any understanding of Thomas Aquinas or uh, any of these church fathers, any of the saints. They might not have even read the Bible all the way through, but they're still a strident, ardent believer because that's just their culture. They grew up with that, and they've never met anybody who wasn't like that. And if they did meet somebody like that, they'd probably immediately other them and sort of keep them at arm's reach, which is probably fine. But this idea that, like, where's that person? What's that person's relationship to a Bronze Age Jew? Like, what's that person's relationship to Byzantium or to the Consul of Venice or something? They don't have any relationship to that, but they're still, you wouldn't look at that person and be like, well, they don't have any connection to the past, or their connection to the past is extremely limited. But they're not a real Christian. They're just, pastors, and you probably wouldn't say psychedelics, but it's just, oh well, their book is just the New Testament and barbecues, or something like some Southern culture. You wouldn't dismiss them like that, or these Christian people wouldn't dismiss them like that, because they would just view that as a hierarchy of belief. And in the same way, if somebody's trying to get into paganism and they go in through Jung and psychedelics, I mean, that's not a bad start. And, most people aren't scholars. Most people are stumbling around in the dark trying to act out belief systems that they don't really understand, that they'll probably never understand. And that goes for Christians, Jews, Muslims, and also pagans, people who are attracted to that sort of polytheistic, natural sort of understanding of things. I mean, even most atheists don't have roots. They don't understand the philosophy of science. They don't want to go back and read Isaac Newton and understand the philosophy of Descartes and all these people. And, like, they don't care. They trust, they believe in the science, and they believe in that, and, they do what people who believe in the science that are smarter than them do. And in the same way, most people who are neo-pagans are dumb kids, and they're pretending they're animals when they're age 18. They're furries. They're doing stupid kid shit. And this idea that not having this deep connection to the past is somehow disqualifies your desire to have this belief, it's asinine. And I wish people would stop making this argument, not only because it is this sort of historical, what's it called? I don't want to say prejudice, but it's a sort of cognitive and theological superiority, and that they don't apply to Christians. They don't apply it to a Christian who doesn't have a deep knowledge of the past, or a deep, like, exegetical understanding of things. But also, these books are actually there, and some of them were written by Christians, and some of them weren't. And I mean, to the extent that somebody wants to go back and dig through their past, they can do that as a pagan. It might take some digging because a lot of the books have been buried by idiot Christians, but or burned in witch burnings in the 1500s. But that doesn't mean that the books aren't there. It doesn't mean that you can't follow a historical thread from the past, or from the present to the past. So I wish Christians would stop talking like that, because frankly, it's ignorant and it's hypocritical and it doesn't make any fucking sense. So, till next time.